The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Raven's Hollow Castle like whispered secrets refusing to fade with dawn. Lady Alara Thornfield pressed her palm against the cool glass of her chamber window, watching the stable boys prepare horses in the courtyard below. 3 weeks remained until her arranged marriage to Duke Aldrich of Westmarch, a man she had met only twice and whose cold gray eyes haunted her dreams. Her lady-in-waiting, Margot bustled about the room laying out riding attire with practiced efficiency. The deep green velvet would complement Ilara's auburn hair, though she suspected Prince Adrian would notice little beyond court protocol during their morning ride. As the king's younger brother, Adrian maintained careful distance from all unmarried ladies of the court, particularly those promised to powerful dukes. "The prince awaits in the rose garden, my lady," Margot announced, fastening the final clasp on Ilara's riding cloak. "He seemed rather eager this morning, if I may say so." Ilara's heart quickened despite her efforts to remain composed. Their rides had become a cherished routine over the past month, offering her the only moments of genuine conversation she experienced at court. Adrian possessed a quick wit and surprising depth that contrasted sharply with his reputation as the carefree second son. Behind his easy charm lay an intelligence that challenged her own thoughts and made her forget, temporarily, the weight of duty pressing upon her shoulders. The rose garden bloomed with early summer splendor, though many buds remained tightly closed, protecting their beauty for the proper moment. Adrian stood beside his black stallion Mercury, adjusting the stirrups with unnecessary attention. His dark hair caught the morning light, and when he looked up at her approach, his smile held a warmth that made her breath catch. "Lady Alara," he said, offering a formal bow that seemed almost mocking in its precision. "I thought we might ride to the old watchtower today. The view of the kingdom is particularly striking when the morning clouds begin to lift." "That sounds lovely, Your Highness." She accepted his assistance, mounting her mare, Starlight, trying to ignore the way her skin tingled where his hands briefly touched hers. "Though I suspect you have more pressing matters than entertaining a soon-to-be married lady." Something flickered across his features before he mounted his own horse. "Perhaps I find such entertainment more valuable than pressing matters," he said quietly. "Besides, someone must ensure you know the true beauty of these lands before you depart for Westmarch." They rode in comfortable silence through the castle gates and along the winding path that led to higher ground. The countryside spread before them in shades of emerald and gold, dotted with stone cottages where smoke curled from chimneys and children played in dooryard gardens. This was the kingdom Ilara would soon leave behind, trading familiar beauty for unknown territory, and a husband who viewed marriage as a business arrangement. "You seem troubled this morning," Adrian observed as they crested a small hill. His voice carried genuine concern rather than polite inquiry. "Are the wedding preparations overwhelming you?" Ilara considered deflecting with pleasantries, but something in his tone encouraged honesty. "I wonder sometimes if I am making the right choice," she admitted. "Duke Aldrich is a good man by all accounts, and the alliance will benefit both our families. Yet I cannot shake the feeling that I am trading away something precious, though I cannot name what it might be." Adrian reined in his horse, turning to study her with those penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see past her carefully maintained composure. "Perhaps what you fear losing is the freedom to choose your own path," he suggested. "Marriage to duty rather than inclination can feel like a kind of death, even when it appears to offer everything the world values." His words struck deeper than she expected, touching fears she had barely acknowledged to herself. "Spoken like someone who will never face such a choice," she said, though without accusation. "As a prince, your marriage will surely be arranged as well, but you have time to prepare, to find ways to make peace with duty." "Time," he repeated, his jaw tightening slightly. "Yes, I suppose I have that luxury." He urged Mercury forward again, but his easy manner had shifted to something more guarded, though perhaps time is not always the blessing it appears to be. They reached the watchtower as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last wisps of morning mist. The ancient structure had stood for 3 centuries, built by Adrian's ancestors to guard against invaders who no longer threatened the realm. From its base, the entire kingdom spread below them like a living tapestry, forests and fields stretching to distant mountains that marked the border with neighboring lands. Adrian dismounted and helped Ilara down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly proper. She found herself reluctant to step away, drawn by his warmth and the subtle scent of sandalwood that clung to his clothes. When she finally looked up, she discovered he had not moved either, and something in his expression made her pulse race. "Ilara," he said softly, dropping the formal address they maintained in public. "If circumstances were different—" "But they are not different," she interrupted, though her voice lacked conviction. "We both have duties, expectations. I will marry Duke Aldrich in 3 weeks, and you will eventually wed some princess chosen for political advantage. This is the way of our world, is it?" He reached out as if to touch her face, then let his hand fall to his side. "Must we always accept what others decide for us? There are those who choose love over duty, who find ways to honor their hearts while serving their kingdoms." The dangerous hope in his voice terrified her more than any threat. "And what of those who depend on our choices? The people of Westmarch who need this alliance? The stability my marriage will bring to both regions? Can we be so selfish as to put our own desires above such considerations?" Adrian stepped back, the distance between them suddenly feeling like an ocean. "You're right, of course," he said formally. "Forgive me, I spoke out of turn." But his eyes told a different story, reflecting a pain that matched her own. They climbed the watchtower in silence, the ancient stones cool beneath their hands. At the top, the wind caught Ilara's hair, sending auburn strands dancing around her face. Adrian watched her survey the kingdom below, memorizing perhaps the sight of her in this place where they had shared so many conversations. "I will miss our rides," she said finally, not looking at him. "These mornings have been among the happiest of my life at court." "And mine," he admitted. "But perhaps it is better that they end before—" He did not finish the thought, but she understood. Before friendship became something deeper, something that would make her upcoming marriage unbearable for them both. A commotion in the courtyard below drew their attention. A messenger on a lathered horse had arrived, and servants rushed to attend him. Even from their elevated position, they could see the urgency in his movements as he dismounted and hurried toward the castle. News from the capital. Perhaps, Adrian mused, though his tone suggested concern rather than curiosity. "We should return." As they descended the tower, Ilara felt the weight of impending change. Whatever news the messenger brought would likely accelerate the timeline of her departure. Soon she would leave Ravenshollow Castle, leave these morning rides, leave Adrian's warm laughter and thoughtful conversation. She would become Duchess of Westmarch, fulfilling her duty while her heart remained forever in this place where love had begun to bloom like the roses in the garden, beautiful but destined to be cut short. The ride back passed too quickly, each hoofbeat carrying them closer to whatever awaited at the castle. Neither spoke of the conversation at the watchtower, but the air between them hummed with unspoken words and suppressed longing. As they entered the courtyard, Ilara noticed unusual activity, servants hurrying between buildings, guards at attention, and her own lady-in-waiting standing anxiously by the stable entrance. "My lady," Margot called out as they approached, "the king requests your immediate presence in the council chamber. Duke Aldrich has arrived unexpectedly from Westmarch." Ilara's blood chilled. The Duke was not expected for another 2 weeks. His early arrival could only mean one thing. Plans were changing and not in her favor. She glanced at Adrian, seeing her own apprehension reflected in his features. "Then I must not keep His Majesty waiting," she said, dismounting with Adrian's assistance one final time. Their fingers brushed as he helped her down, a fleeting touch that felt like farewell. As she walked toward the castle, Ilara did not look back, though she could feel Adrian's gaze following her. Whatever awaited in the council chamber would likely seal her fate more firmly than ever. The brief, precious interlude of morning rides and growing affection was ending, replaced by the harsh realities of duty and political necessity. The great doors of Ravenshollow Castle closed behind her with a resonant thud, and Lady Ilara Thornfield squared her shoulders to face whatever future awaited, carrying the memory of Adrian's almost confession like a secret flame in her heart. The council chamber felt suffocating despite its high vaulted ceilings and tall windows. Ilara entered to find King Edmund seated at the head of the long oak table, his weathered face grave beneath silver hair that spoke of decades bearing the crown's weight. To his right stood Duke Aldrich of Westmarch, his imposing frame clad in travel-worn leather that suggested urgent haste rather than planned arrival. Aldrich was not an unkind man, Ilara reminded herself as she curtsied formally. His sharp features held intelligence, and his reputation spoke of fairness in governing his lands. Yet when his gray eyes assessed her, she felt like livestock being evaluated for breeding potential, rather than a woman worthy of courtship and affection. "Lady Alara," the king said, gesturing for her to approach. "Duke Aldrich brings concerning news from the eastern borders. It appears our timeline must be accelerated." "Your Majesty," she replied, folding her hands to still their trembling. "How may I serve the crown?" Duke Aldrich stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to command. "Rebels have risen in the eastern provinces, my lady. They question the legitimacy of our upcoming union, claiming it represents an overreach of royal power into their traditional territories. Our marriage must occur immediately to demonstrate the strength of our alliance and quell their insurrection before it spreads." The words hit Alara like physical blows. Immediately. Not in 3 weeks. Not even in 3 days. The future she had been preparing to accept was rushing toward her with the speed of an avalanche. "I see," she managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "When would this ceremony take place?" "Tomorrow evening," King Edmund said gently, though his tone brooked no argument. "I know this is sudden, child, but the stability of the realm depends upon swift action. The Eastern Lords will not dare challenge a fait accompli, but they grow bolder with each day of delay. Tomorrow evening, 24 hours to say farewell to everything she had known, to the morning rides that had become her sanctuary, to conversations that challenged her mind and warmed her heart. To Adrian, of course, Your Majesty," she heard herself say. "I shall be ready." Duke Aldrich's features softened slightly at her composure. "You show great courage, Lady Alara. I know this is not the wedding you envisioned, but I promise you will want for nothing as my Duchess. Westmarch is a beautiful land, and its people will come to love you as I hope to in time." The kindness in his words only made the situation more painful. In another life, she might have found contentment with this decent, honorable man. But her heart had already been given to someone she could never have, making her upcoming vows feel like betrayal even before they were spoken. "Thank you, Your Grace," she replied. "I am honored by your regard." The king dismissed her to prepare for the hasty ceremony, and Alara walked through the castle corridors in a daze. Servants bustled around her, already transforming the great hall for tomorrow's celebration. Flowers were being arranged, musicians consulted, and the kitchen staff prepared for a feast that would seal her fate. In her chambers, Margot waited with barely contained excitement, having already heard the news through the servants' network that carried information faster than royal messengers. "Oh, my lady, how romantic," Margot exclaimed, then caught sight of Alara's expression. "Are you not pleased? Duke Aldrich is considered quite a catch, and to be married so suddenly, it's like something from the old ballads." "Yes," Alara said quietly, moving to the window where she had watched Adrian prepare his horse that very morning. "Quite romantic." But her heart felt like lead as she contemplated a future stretching endlessly before her, filled with duty but empty of the joy she had just begun to discover. Somewhere in the castle, Adrian was learning of the changed plans, perhaps feeling the same crushing finality that threatened to steal her breath. As if summoned by her thoughts, a soft knock came at her chamber door. Margot opened it to reveal Prince Adrian himself, his formal court attire immaculate despite the tension visible in his posture. "Your Highness?" Margot curtsied deeply. "Lady Alara, Prince Adrian requests an audience." Alara's pulse quickened, but she maintained her composure. "Of course. Margot, please ensure we are not disturbed for a few moments." Her lady-in-waiting withdrew discreetly, closing the door behind her. Alone with Adrian, Alara felt the careful wall she had been building around her heart begin to crumble. "You have heard," she said, not making it a question. "The entire castle knows by now," he replied, moving closer but stopping at a respectful distance. "Alara, I'm so sorry. If there were anything I could do—" "But there is nothing," she interrupted, though not harshly. "We both knew this day would come. We simply thought we had more time." Adrian's hands clenched at his sides, and she could see the struggle playing out across his features. Did we? Or were we fooling ourselves, thinking that somehow circumstances might change, that duty might bend to allow for happiness? The pain in his voice broke something loose inside her chest. "Adrian, please, do not make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" He stepped closer, his eyes blazing with suppressed emotion. "In 24 hours you will marry another man. You will leave this place forever, and I will spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had possessed the courage to speak sooner." And what would you have said? The question escaped before she could stop it, driven by her own desperate need to know. He was silent for a long moment, conflict warring in his expression. Then, as if a dam had burst, the words poured out. That I love you, he said simply. That every morning I wake hoping to see your face. That your laughter has become essential as breathing. That the thought of you in another man's arms makes me want to rage against the very foundations of duty and honor that have shaped my entire life. Tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. Adrian, I know it changes nothing, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. I know you will marry Aldrich tomorrow because you must. Because it is right, because the peace of two provinces depends upon it. But I needed you to know. Needed you to understand that these past weeks have not been mere pleasant diversions for me. She wanted to run to him, to feel his arms around her, to steal one perfect moment before duty claimed her forever. Instead, she remained where she stood, knowing that any physical comfort would only make their separation more unbearable. I love you too, she whispered, the admission feeling like both liberation and doom. I think I began falling in love with you the first time you made me laugh during those dreadful court dinners. When you whispered that the ambassador's toupee looked like a deceased squirrel. Despite everything, Adrian smiled at the memory. You nearly choked on your wine. You were terribly wicked, she said, matching his smile through her tears. And every day since you have made me feel more alive, more myself than I ever thought possible. They stood there, two people who loved each other completely, yet were powerless to change their circumstances. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, marking the passage of precious time that would soon run out forever. What will you do? Ilara asked finally. After I'm gone? Adrian straightened, and she could see him reassembling his princely composure like armor. My duty, as you will do yours. Perhaps I will travel to the northern kingdoms as my brother has suggested. Distance might help. He did not finish the thought. And I will be a good duchess, she said, needing to voice the commitment aloud. I will care for the people of Westmarch, support my husband's endeavors, and perhaps in time, find contentment if not joy. You deserve joy, Ilara. You deserve to be treasured, not merely appreciated for your bloodline and diplomatic value. As do you, Adrian. When the time comes for you to marry, I hope you will find someone who sees your true worth, not just your title. Another knock interrupted them, this time more insistent. Margot's voice carried through the door with barely concealed urgency. My lady, forgive the intrusion, but the seamstress awaits for the final fitting of your wedding gown. Duke Aldrich also requests a private audience before the evening meal. The real world was intruding, demanding attention and preparation for tomorrow's ceremony. Their stolen moment was ending, and with it perhaps their last chance to speak freely of their feelings. I must go, Ilara said, though every instinct screamed against it. Adrian nodded, moving toward the door. As he reached for the handle, he paused without turning around. Ilara, I want you to know that loving you, even briefly, even impossibly, has been the greatest honor of my life. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever future awaits us both, I will treasure these weeks as the time when I truly understood what it meant to live fully. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with the afternoon shadows and the weight of words that would have to sustain her through all the lonely years ahead. Outside her window, servants continued preparing for a celebration that felt more like a funeral. Tomorrow she would wear white silk and speak vows of fidelity to a good man she did not love, while the man who held her heart stood witness among the assembled nobles, his face carefully composed to hide the same breaking heart that threatened to tear her apart. But tonight, she would hold close the memory of his confession, the knowledge that she had been truly loved, even if only briefly, even if circumstance made that love impossible. The wedding gown hung like a ghost in Ilara's chamber, its ivory silk catching the firelight as evening descended upon Ravenshollow Castle. The seamstress had departed hours ago, declaring the hurried alterations perfect, though Ilara felt anything but perfect as she stared at the dress that would transform her from Lady Ilara Thornfield into Duchess of Westmarch. Duke Aldrich had requested their private audience in the castle's smaller library, away from the bustle of wedding preparations. When Ilara arrived, she found him standing before the great hearth, his travel clothes replaced by fine court attire that emphasized his imposing stature. At 32, he was not yet old, though silver threads already touched his dark hair at the temples. Lady Ilara, he said, turning as she entered. Please be seated. I thought we should speak honestly before tomorrow's ceremony. She chose a chair near the fire, grateful for its warmth against the chill that seemed to have settled in her bones. Of course, Your Grace. Aldrich, please. We are to be married in less than 18 hours. He took the chair opposite her, his gray eyes studying her face with unexpected gentleness. You seem troubled. I know this hasty arrangement is not what any young woman dreams of for her wedding day. Ilara forced herself to meet his gaze. I understand the necessity, Your Grace, Aldrich. The stability of our lands must take precedence over personal preferences. Must it? His question surprised her. I confess I had hoped for time to court you properly, to allow affection to grow between us before we spoke our vows. This rebellion has stolen that opportunity from us both. There was something in his tone that made her look more closely at him. Behind his composed exterior, she glimpsed a man wrestling with his own doubts about their rushed union. You speak as if you, too, have reservations about our marriage, she said carefully. Aldrich leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him. I am 32 years old, Lady Ilara, and I have had the luxury of choosing when to marry. In all those years, I have never found a woman who stirred my heart as well as my political interests. When our fathers arranged this match, I confess I hoped you might be different, but I also accepted that ours would be a marriage of mutual respect rather than passion. And now I find myself wondering if I am doing you a disservice by proceeding with such haste. You are young, beautiful, intelligent. Surely you deserve the chance to marry for love rather than duty. His unexpected consideration touched something in her chest, though it could not heal the wound that Adrian's confession had opened there. We all have duties, Aldrich. Mine is to strengthen the bonds between our lands through marriage. Your concern for my feelings does you credit, but it changes nothing essential. Perhaps not, he agreed, but I want you to know that I will strive to be a worthy husband, even if I cannot promise to be the one your heart might have chosen freely. The irony struck her like a physical blow. Here was a good man, offering kindness and honest partnership while her heart belonged to someone she could never have. In a different world, one where she had not already given her love to Adrian, she might have found happiness with Duke Aldrich. You are more thoughtful than most men in your position would be, she said softly. Perhaps in time, mutual respect might grow into something deeper. I hope so, he said, though something in his expression suggested his own heart might be elsewhere as well. There is something else I must tell you, something that may affect how you view our arrangement. Ilara's pulse quickened at his serious tone. What is it? Aldrich rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the torchlit courtyard where guards maintained their vigilant watch. The rebellion in the eastern provinces is more serious than we have publicly admitted. Their leader is not some common agitator but Lord Garrett Blackwood, my own cousin, who believes he has a stronger claim to Westmarch than I do. Your cousin? Ilara felt cold fear creep up her spine. But surely his claim has no legal standing. Legally, no, but he commands significant support among the eastern lords, particularly those who have always resented royal influence in our traditional territories. Our marriage represents the final seal of alliance between Westmarch and the Crown, something Garrett cannot allow if he hopes to press his claim successfully. The implications struck her immediately. You believe he might attempt to disrupt the ceremony? It is possible, Aldrich said grimly. My spies report unusual activity near the eastern borders. Armed men moving under cover of darkness, messengers carrying sealed communications. Garrett is no fool. He knows that once we are wed, and the alliance is formalized, his cause becomes far more difficult to advance. Ilara's mind raced as she processed this information. The hasty wedding was not just about quelling political unrest, but about outmaneuvering a direct threat to Aldrich's rule. She was not merely a bride, but a strategic piece in a game that could determine the future of Westmarch. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Surely it would be easier to proceed without my knowledge of the danger. Aldrich turned from the window, his expression resolute. Because you deserve to understand what you are truly entering into. Marriage to me may place you in considerable peril. Garrett will view you as both symbol and target of everything he opposes. I cannot in good conscience bind you to me without your full awareness of the risks. His honesty touched her more deeply than passionate declarations might have. Here was a man willing to risk losing his political alliance to ensure she made an informed choice. a nobility of character that made her respect him even as her heart remained elsewhere. "And if I chose to withdraw from our engagement?" she asked, though they both knew it was an impossible hypothetical. "What then for Westmarch?" "Then I would face Garrett's rebellion alone, without the Crown's full support, and likely lose both my lands and my life. The eastern provinces would fall into chaos, and thousands would suffer for my cousin's ambition." His voice held no accusation, only weary acceptance. "But the choice remains yours to make." Elara stood and moved to stand beside him at the window. Below, she could see servants carrying supplies for tomorrow's feast, blissfully unaware of the dangerous currents swirling beneath the surface of celebration. Somewhere in the castle, Adrian was likely struggling with his own demons, knowing that tomorrow would seal their separation forever. "There is no choice," she said quietly. "Not really. Too many lives depend on this alliance for personal considerations to matter. Even if it means living with constant threat, even if Garrett's rebellion succeeds despite our precautions." She thought of her conversation with Adrian, of his words about choosing love over duty. But some duties were larger than personal happiness, some responsibilities too weighty to abandon for the heart's desires. "Especially then," she said firmly, "if there is danger ahead, then Westmarch needs unity more than ever. Our people cannot afford the luxury of our personal doubts." Aldrich studied her profile in the firelight, and she sensed a shift in his regard for her. "You are stronger than I initially perceived, Lady Elara. Perhaps we will make better partners than either of us anticipated." "Perhaps," she agreed, though her throat tightened with unshed tears. "Tell me about Westmarch. If I am to be Duchess there, I should know more than court gossip about my new home." For the next hour, Aldrich spoke of his lands with genuine affection. Rolling hills dotted with prosperous farms, mining towns that produced the finest silver in 3 kingdoms, coastal cities where merchants from distant lands brought exotic goods to trade. He described the castle where they would live, ancient but comfortable, with gardens that his mother had loved tending before her death 5 years prior. As he talked, Elara began to see past the political alliance to the reality of the life awaiting her. She would have meaningful work there, people to care for, a purpose beyond her own happiness. It was not the future she might have chosen, but it could be a fulfilling one if she allowed it to be. A commotion in the courtyard drew their attention. Torches were being lit in greater numbers than usual, and armed guards were taking positions throughout the grounds. The heightened security only emphasized the dangers that awaited beyond tomorrow's ceremony. "I should retire," Elara said, noting the lateness of the hour. "Tomorrow will be a long day." "Indeed." Aldrich rose and offered her a formal bow. "Lady Elara, I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever challenges we face in the future, I am honored to have you as my partner in this endeavor. You have shown courage tonight that many seasoned warriors would envy." His words carried genuine warmth, and for the first time, Elara felt a spark of hope that their marriage might become something meaningful, even if it could never be the great love she had glimpsed with Adrian. "Thank you, Aldrich. Your honesty has meant more to me than you know." As she walked through the castle corridors toward her chambers, Elara passed beneath portraits of long-dead nobles who had also married for duty, who had also sacrificed personal desires for the greater good. Some looked stern and resigned in their painted faces, but others seemed to glow with a contentment that spoke of finding joy within the boundaries of obligation. Tomorrow she would join their ranks, becoming another woman who chose duty over desire, but perhaps in time duty might offer its own rewards. Perhaps love could grow in the soil of mutual respect and shared purpose, even if it was a D. Dawn broke gray and somber over Ravenshollow Castle, with heavy clouds promising rain before the evening's ceremony. Elara woke to the sound of hurried footsteps in the corridors and Margot's urgent voice calling through her chamber door. "My lady, please wake. There is trouble." Elara sat up quickly, her heart immediately racing. "What kind of trouble, Margot?" "Armed men were spotted near the eastern road just after midnight," Margot said as she rushed into the room, her usually perfect appearance disheveled with worry. "The guards have tripled the watch, and Duke Aldrich requests your immediate presence in the king's private study." The rebellion. Lord Garrett Blackwood had made his move sooner than anyone anticipated. Elara dressed quickly in riding attire rather than court gowns, instinctively preparing for whatever action might be required. If they needed to flee the castle, Elaborate dresses would only hinder their escape. The king's private study buzzed with tense activity when she arrived. King Edmund stood over a large map spread across his desk, while Duke Aldrich pointed to various locations marked with colored pins. Prince Adrian was present as well, wearing leather armor instead of court finery, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "Lady Alara," the king said without looking up, "we have a situation that may require changes to today's plans. How serious is the threat, Your Majesty?" she asked, moving to study the map. "More serious than we hoped," Aldrich replied grimly. "My cousin has managed to gather nearly 200 men, and they are positioned to strike during the wedding ceremony when our attention will be divided. He intends to capture both of us and declare our marriage invalid under duress." Adrian's jaw tightened as he spoke for the first time. "Our scouts report they have inside knowledge of the castle's defenses and the ceremony's timing. Someone has been feeding them information." The implication hung heavy in the air. There was a traitor among them, someone who had access to sensitive plans and had been passing details to the rebels. Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What are our options?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing pulse. "We can postpone the ceremony and weather a siege," the king said, "but that gives Garrett time to gather more support and potentially attract foreign allies who would benefit from instability in our region. Or," Aldrich added, "we can proceed as planned but with significant modifications to our security arrangements. The ceremony would serve as bait to draw Garrett into attacking a prepared position rather than allowing him to choose the time and place of confrontation." "You want to use our wedding as a trap," Alara said, understanding immediately. "The thought had occurred to me," Aldrich admitted. "Though I dislike placing you in such danger, there are other ways to handle this crisis that do not require you to act as bait." Before Alara could respond, a guard entered with news that made everyone's blood run cold. "Your Majesty, a messenger approaches under a flag of truce. He bears Lord Garrett's seal." "Bring him to the Great Hall," King Edmund commanded. "Full guard, but allow him to speak." The Great Hall, which had been decorated for a wedding celebration, now felt like a tribunal as they assembled to hear Garrett Blackwood's terms. The messenger was a young man who clearly wished he were anywhere else, his hands trembling slightly as he unrolled his master's demands. "My Lord Garrett Blackwood, rightful Duke of Westmarch, offers these terms," he began in a voice that cracked slightly. "Recognize his claim to the duchy, dissolve the arranged marriage between the pretender Aldrich and Lady Alara, and withdraw all royal interference in Westmarch affairs. In exchange, he will spare the castle and all within from bloodshed." The silence that followed was deafening. King Edmund's face had turned to stone, while Aldrich's hand moved instinctively to his sword. But it was Alara who spoke first, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "And if we refuse these generous terms?" she asked, stepping forward despite the danger. The messenger swallowed hard. "Then Lord Garrett will take by force what is rightfully his. The wedding will not proceed, and any who stand in his way will be considered enemies of the true Duke." "I see," Alara said calmly. "And does your master truly believe that 200 untrained farmers and malcontents can overcome the defenses of Ravenshollow Castle and the combined might of two royal houses?" "My lady," the messenger stammered, clearly unprepared for such direct questioning. "Lord Garrett has other advantages." "What other advantages?" Adrian demanded, moving to stand beside Alara in a show of solidarity that did not go unnoticed by those present. I cannot say, Your Highness, but Lord Garrett is confident in his cause." King Edmund rose from his throne, his voice carrying the authority of decades of rule. "Tell your master that his terms are rejected. The marriage between Lady Alara and Duke Aldrich will proceed as planned. If he wishes to contest Aldrich's rightful claim to Westmarch, he may do so through proper legal channels, not through armed rebellion." "Your Majesty," the messenger pleaded, "Lord Garrett hoped you would see reason. He has no wish for bloodshed, but he will not allow this marriage to proceed. Too much depends upon stopping it. Then he has made his choice, as have we," Aldrich said firmly. "You may tell my cousin that I will be happy to settle this matter personally, sword to sword, if he has the courage to face me without hiding behind his hired army." The messenger bowed quickly and retreated, leaving the assembled nobles to contemplate the gravity of their situation. War was no longer a possibility but an inevitability, and it would begin before the day was done. "We need to know what other advantages Garrett believes he possesses," the king said grimly. Adrian, double the watch on all approaches. I want every gate secured and every servant questioned about their recent activities. Already done, brother, Adrian replied. But there is something else we must consider. If Garrett is so confident, he may have already infiltrated the castle. The wedding ceremony will present numerous opportunities for sabotage or assassination. Ilara felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Every person in this room, every servant preparing for the celebration, every guard standing watch, all of their lives hung in the balance of choices made in the next few hours. I have a proposal, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to suggest. We proceed with the ceremony as planned, but we use Garrett's expectations against him. What do you mean? Aldrich asked. He expects us to be focused on the wedding, distracted by celebration and ceremony. What if we give him exactly what he expects while preparing for what he doesn't? The ceremony becomes our battlefield, but one where we control the terrain. King Edmund studied her with new respect. You would put yourself directly in harm's way. I am already in harm's way, Ilara replied. At least this way we choose how to face the danger. Besides, she looked directly at Aldrich. You said yourself that our people cannot afford for us to fail. If we must fight, let us fight together. Adrian's expression was unreadable, but she could see the conflict in his eyes, pride at her courage warring with terror at the thought of her in danger. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. The lady makes a valid tactical point, he said formally. If we are to use the ceremony as bait, we need to ensure adequate protection while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. Agreed, Aldrich said, and Ilara was struck by the trust he was placing in her judgment. But we need contingency plans. If the attack comes during the vows themselves, then we finish them quickly and fight as husband and wife, Ilara said with more confidence than she felt. Better to face whatever comes as allies than as strangers bound only by political necessity. The next several hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. The Great Hall was discreetly reinforced with additional guards disguised as servants and wedding guests. Weapons were hidden throughout the space and escape routes were planned and rehearsed. The wedding feast was altered to include fewer courses, allowing for a quicker conclusion if battle became necessary. Through it all, Ilara found herself working closely with Adrian on security arrangements, their professional collaboration a bittersweet echo of the partnership that might have been. He was careful to maintain proper distance, but she caught him watching, her with an expression of profound admiration mixed with fear for her safety. You do not have to do this, he said, quietly during a brief moment, when they found themselves alone in the armory. There are other ways to handle Garrett's threat that do not require you to stand in the center of a potential battlefield. Yes, I do have to do this, she replied, checking the small dagger that would be concealed in her wedding gown, not because I am forced to, but because it is the right thing to do. The people of Westmarch deserve better than civil war, and sometimes the only way to prevent greater bloodshed is to risk your own. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. I cannot bear the thought of you in danger while I stand helplessly by, bound by protocol and duty. You will not be standing helplessly by, she said softly. You will be protecting the king and ensuring that if something happens to Aldrich and me, Garrett cannot claim victory. That is not helplessness. That is the most crucial duty of all. Their eyes met for a long moment, and she saw in his gaze all the words he could not speak, all the fears he could not voice. She wanted to reach out to H. The great hall of Raven's Hollow Castle glowed with hundreds of candles, their warm light reflecting off polished armor and jeweled gowns as the assembled nobles awaited the evening's ceremony. To any casual observer, it appeared to be a magnificent wedding celebration. Only those who knew where to look could spot the additional guards positioned throughout the hall, their hands resting casually near concealed weapons. Ilara stood in the castle's chapel anteroom, her wedding gown transformed by her own resolve into something magnificent rather than mournful. The ivory silk caught the candlelight like captured starlight, and the ancient sapphire necklace that had belonged to Aldrich's mother gleamed at her throat, a gesture of acceptance and trust from her soon-to-be husband. Margot fussed with the final details of her appearance, chattering nervously about the grandeur of the occasion, while remaining carefully ignorant of the true dangers lurking beyond the decorated walls. You look radiant, my lady, Margot said, stepping back to admire her work. Duke Aldrich is a fortunate man indeed. Thank you, Margot, Alara replied, though her attention was focused on the sounds filtering through the stone walls, the rustle of silk gowns, the low murmur of conversation, and underneath it all, the subtle movements of armed men taking their positions. A soft knock at the door announced King Edmund's arrival. He entered wearing his finest robes of state, the crown of Ravenshollow gleaming upon his silver hair, but his eyes held the alertness of a warrior rather than the benevolence of a celebrant. "It is time, my dear," he said gently, offering her his arm. "Are you ready?" "As ready as one can be for a wedding that may become a battlefield," she replied with a smile that held more courage than humor. "You honor us all with your bravery," the king said as they walked toward the great hall. "Whatever happens tonight, remember that you face it not alone but surrounded by those who would die to protect you." The great doors opened to reveal a scene of breathtaking splendor. The hall stretched before them, lined with nobles in their finest attire, musicians ready with trumpets and lyres, and at the far end, the altar where Duke Aldrich waited in midnight blue velvet that emphasized his commanding presence. But it was Prince Adrian who caught her attention first. He stood to the right of the altar in his role as the king's representative, resplendent in ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness. When their eyes met across the length of the hall, she saw in his gaze a mixture of love, fear, and fierce protectiveness that nearly made her stumble. The processional music began, and Alara walked down the aisle with measured steps, her eyes taking in not just the wedding guests but the strategic positions of their disguised guards. Lord Hampton stood near the eastern wall, his hand resting on what appeared to be a decorative sword but was certainly sharp steel. Captain Morris was positioned near the great hearth, close enough to protect the king but with clear sightlines to all entrances. As she approached the altar, Duke Aldrich stepped forward to receive her from the king's arm. In his gray eyes, she saw not the calculating politician she had feared, but a man who understood the magnitude of what they were attempting together. "You are beautiful," he said quietly, as King Edmund placed her hand in his, "and braver than any warrior I have known." "As are you," she replied, meaning it. Whatever her heart's true inclinations, she could not fault Aldrich's character or courage. The ceremony began with traditional words that had bound couples for centuries, but tonight they carried additional weight. Every vow spoken was both promise and declaration of war against those who would tear apart the peace their union represented. "Do you, Aldrich of Westmarch, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife, to honor and protect her above all others, in times of peace and conflict, prosperity and trial?" "I do," Aldrich replied, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Do you, Alara of Thornfield, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband, to stand beside him as partner and ally, sharing his burdens and his victories in joy and sorrow alike?" This was the moment, the words that would bind her legally to Aldrich, while sealing away forever any possibility of a future with Adrian. She looked at her groom's steadfast face, then beyond him to where Adrian stood, his expression carefully controlled but his eyes bright with unshed emotion. "I do," she said clearly, and felt something shift. Inside her chest, not the death of love, but its transformation into a different kind of strength. The priest raised his hands to pronounce them married when the attack came. It began not with the dramatic assault they had prepared for, but with something far more insidious. A guest near the back of the hall suddenly cried out and collapsed, followed quickly by several others. Poisoned wine, Alara realized with horror. Garrett's other advantage was not military might but treachery from within. "Poison," Captain Morris shouted, drawing his sword as chaos erupted throughout the hall. Nobles screamed and fled toward the exits, while guards rushed to secure the king and the wedding party. But the poison was only the first wave. As the hall descended into pandemonium, armed men burst through the servants' entrances, rebels who had infiltrated the castle during the confusion. Garrett Blackwood himself strode through the main doors, flanked by a dozen warriors, his eyes fixed on the altar where his cousin stood. "Stand down, Aldrich," Garrett commanded, his voice carrying over the sounds of battle that had erupted throughout the hall. "Your charade of a wedding ends here." Instead of cowering, Duke Aldrich stepped protectively in front of Alara while drawing his sword with practiced ease. "The only charade here is your pathetic attempt at usurpation, cousin. Face me honorably if you dare, rather than hiding behind poison and hired killers. Adrian had moved swiftly to the king's side, but his eyes never left Alara as the battle raged around them. She saw him dispatch 2 rebels with efficient sword work, while positioning himself to protect both his brother and maintain clear sight of her position. "This marriage is invalid," Garrett declared, advancing with his weapons raised. "Conducted under duress and built on lies. The people of Westmarch will never accept a duchess chosen by foreign kings. Then let the people judge for themselves." Alara surprised everyone, including herself, by stepping out from behind Aldrich's protection. "I am Alara of Westmarch now, by choice and by law. If you would challenge that, face us both." Her declaration seemed to electrify the remaining wedding guests who had not fled. Several nobles who had been wavering in their loyalties drew their own swords in support of the newly married couple, while others moved to assist the overwhelmed guards. The battle that followed was fierce but brief. Garrett's forces were outnumbered and fighting on unfamiliar ground, while the defenders fought with the desperation of those protecting not just their lives, but their kingdom's future. When Garrett himself fell beneath the combined assault of Aldrich's blade and Lord Hampton's warhammer, his remaining followers quickly surrendered. As the smoke cleared and the wounded were tended, Alara found herself still standing at the altar, her wedding gown torn and stained, but her spirit unbroken. She and Aldrich had fought side by side in those chaotic minutes, and she felt a bond forged between them that went deeper than political alliance. The connection of warriors who had faced death together and emerged victorious. "Are you injured?" Adrian appeared at her side, having fought his way across the hall the moment the immediate danger passed. "Bruised but whole," she replied, accepting the cloak he wrapped around her shoulders. "And you?" "The same." His eyes searched her face with desperate intensity. "When I saw you step into the open facing Garrett directly, I have never been so terrified in my life. I could not hide while others fought for the future I had chosen," she said simply. "It would have made a mockery of everything we were trying to accomplish." Aldrich approached them, blood on his sword but satisfaction in his expression. "My lady wife," he said with a slight smile, "you have proven yourself a true Duchess of Westmarch tonight. Our people will sing songs of your courage for generations." "Our people," she repeated, tasting the words. For the first time they felt natural rather than forced. "Yes, I believe they are truly ours now." As the great hall was cleared and the castle secured, Alara realized that something fundamental had changed within her. The marriage that had begun as duty had been baptized in battle and emerged as something far stronger, a true partnership forged in fire and sealed with shared purpose. Later that evening, as she and Aldrich held court to receive the loyalty oaths of nobles who had witnessed their courage, Alara caught sight of Adrian watching from across the room. The pain in his eyes was real, but it was tempered now by something else: respect for the choice she had made and the woman she had proven herself to be. She would always love him, but tonight had taught her that love could take many forms. The passionate devotion she felt for Adrian would remain a treasured memory, while the growing partnership with Aldrich offered its own rewards: mutual respect, shared purpose, and the deep satisfaction of building something meaningful together. As the last noble departed and she and her new husband prepared to retire, Alara looked back at the great hall where she had been married and baptized by fire on the same night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they worked to rebuild Westmarch and heal the wounds left by Garrett's rebellion, but tonight she was content. 3 months had passed since the wedding that became a battle, and autumn painted the hills of Westmarch in shades of gold and crimson. Duchess Alara stood on the battlements of Westmarch Castle, watching the harvest celebrations in the valley below where her people gathered to give thanks for the seasons, bounty, and the peace that had settled over their lands. The castle had become truly home in ways she had never expected. Each morning brought new responsibilities that challenged her mind and gave purpose to her days. She had established schools for the children of tenant farmers, negotiated trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms, and worked alongside Aldrich to rebuild the eastern provinces damaged by Garrett's brief rebellion. Their marriage had evolved into something she had not dared hope for. During those terrifying early days, a true partnership, built on mutual respect, shared goals, and growing affection. While it might never be the passionate love she had felt for Adrian, it had its own deep satisfaction and joy. Deep in thought again, Aldrich's voice came from behind her, warm with the easy familiarity they had developed over the months of working together. Always, she replied with a smile, turning to accept the cloak he brought against the evening chill. I was thinking about how much has changed since our rather eventful wedding night. Indeed, he said, moving to stand beside her at the wall. When I married a political ally, I never imagined I would gain such a capable partner in governance. The Eastern Lords speak of little else but your wisdom in mediating their disputes. Flattery, Your Grace? She teased, using the formal address that had become an affectionate joke between them. Never, Your Grace, he replied in kind, his gray eyes crinkling with genuine humor, though I confess I have something more than compliments to share with you. The serious note in his voice drew her full attention. Over the months, she had learned to read his moods and expressions, and something significant was weighing on his mind. What is it, Aldrich? A messenger arrived this afternoon from Raven's Hollow, he said carefully. King Edmund requests our presence at court for the winter season. It seems Prince Adrian is finally to be married, and the king wishes us to witness the ceremony. Ilara's heart stuttered for a moment before settling back into its steady rhythm. She had known this day would come eventually. Adrian was 30 years old, and the kingdom's needs would eventually require him to marry and produce heirs to secure the succession. I see, she said, proud that her voice remained steady. When is the ceremony to take place? In 6 weeks' time. The bride is Princess Sophia of Valyria, reportedly both beautiful and intelligent. The alliance will strengthen our kingdom's position significantly. Princess Sophia. Ilara had heard of her, a renowned beauty with golden hair and a reputation for wit and learning. If Adrian had to marry for duty rather than love, at least his bride would be worthy of his intelligence and charm. Then we should begin preparations for the journey, she said practically. Will we need to bring substantial gifts? I assume this will be a grand affair requiring appropriate ceremony from all the noble houses. Aldrich studied her face carefully, as if searching for cracks in her composure. Ilara, I want you to know that if attending this wedding would be difficult for you, we could send our regrets. The king would understand if pressing matters kept us in Westmarch. His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. Over the months, Aldrich had never directly addressed her past feelings for Adrian, but his perceptive nature had no doubt detected the undercurrents that remained. That he would offer her an escape from potential pain showed the consideration that had grown between them. Thank you, she said softly, placing her hand over his where it rested on the stone wall. But we will attend. Adrian is your friend and our king's brother. Our presence will demonstrate the strength of our alliance and our respect for the royal family. Are you certain? I would not have you endure unnecessary pain for the sake of political appearances. Ilara considered his question seriously. Would it hurt to see Adrian marry another woman? Certainly. But the sharp, desperate pain of those early days had mellowed into something more manageable. A bittersweet ache for what might have been, tempered by gratitude for what she had found instead. I am certain, she said firmly. Besides, I find myself curious to meet this Princess Sophia. Any woman who can capture Adrian's attention must be remarkable indeed. They spent the evening planning their journey and discussing the gifts they would present to the bride and groom. As they worked together by candlelight, Ilara marveled again at how comfortable their partnership had become. Where once she had feared endless loneliness in an arranged marriage, she had found companionship, purpose, and a deep fondness that grew stronger with each passing day. The weeks of preparation passed quickly, filled with the usual demands of governing Westmarch and readying for their extended absence. Ilara found herself looking forward to seeing Raven's Hollow Castle again, to renewing friendships with courtiers she had known before her marriage, and yes, to seeing Adrian happy with his chosen bride. The journey to Raven's Hollow took 5 days through countryside now vibrant with autumn colors. As their carriage approached the familiar towers and battlements, Ilara felt a complex mixture of emotions, nostalgia for her youth spent within those walls, pride in how far she had traveled since leaving them, and nervous anticipation for the reunion ahead. King Edmund received them in the great hall with warmth that seemed genuine, rather than merely diplomatic. He had aged somewhat in the months since the wedding battle, but his eyes held the satisfaction of a ruler who had successfully navigated dangerous political waters. Duke Aldrich. Duchess Ilara, he said, embracing them both with paternal affection. Welcome home. Your presence honors us greatly. The honor is ours, Your Majesty, Ilara replied. We bring greetings from all the people of Westmarch and their gratitude for the peace your wisdom has secured. Spoken like a true duchess, the king said with approval. I have heard remarkable reports of your governance, my dear. The eastern provinces sing your praises, and trade agreements you have negotiated have brought prosperity to regions that knew only conflict under my predecessor. As they exchanged pleasantries and caught up on the months of separation, Ilara found herself scanning the assembled courtiers for a familiar face. Adrian was nowhere to be seen, likely attending to wedding preparations or spending time with his bride-to-be. Prince Adrian is with Princess Sophia and her entourage, the king said, noting her subtle search. They are reviewing the final details of tomorrow's ceremony. You will see them both at tonight's feast. That evening, the great hall where Ilara had been married in battle was transformed once again, this time for celebration rather than conflict. Tapestries in the royal colors hung from the walls. Musicians filled the air with joyful melodies, and the assembled nobility wore their finest clothes to honor the prince and his intended bride. When Adrian entered with Princess Sophia on his arm, Ilara had to admit that they made a striking couple. The princess was indeed beautiful, with flowing golden hair and vivid blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence and humor. More importantly, the easy way she and Adrian conversed suggested a genuine compatibility that eased some of Ilara's concerns for his future happiness. Your Grace, Adrian said when the formal presentations brought him to where she and Aldrich stood. It is good to see you again. You look well. Marriage clearly agrees with you. As it soon will with you, Your Highness, she replied gracefully. May I present my compliments to Princess Sophia? Your reputation for wisdom and beauty precedes you, Your Highness. Princess Sophia studied Ilara with frank curiosity, before offering a warm smile. Duchess Ilara, I have heard such wonderful things about your work in Westmarch. I confess I had hoped we might find time to speak. Privately during your visit, I would welcome your advice on managing the transition from princess to married woman. Her directness and evident sincerity immediately won Ilara's approval. I would be delighted, Your Highness. Perhaps tomorrow before the ceremony? As the evening progressed, Ilara found herself genuinely enjoying the celebration. She and Aldrich danced together with the easy grace they had developed, and she felt pride in how their partnership was viewed by the assembled nobles. Their marriage had clearly succeeded in ways that went beyond political necessity. Later in the evening, as she stepped onto a balcony for fresh air, she was surprised to find Adrian waiting in the shadows. I hoped you might come out here, he said quietly. This was always your favorite spot during court gatherings. You remembered, she said, moved despite herself by his attention to such details. I remember everything about our time together, he replied simply, including how much you have accomplished since leaving here. I am genuinely proud of the woman you have become, the leader you have proven yourself to be. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out over the castle grounds where they had once ridden together in those precious morning hours. Are you happy, Adrian? She asked finally. With Princess Sophia, I mean. She seems lovely, but I want to know that you have found contentment. He considered the question seriously before answering. Not the kind of happiness I once imagined, but a different kind of satisfaction. Sophia is intelligent, kind, and understands the requirements of Royal Mario.